Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 18, Rules of Engagement. But before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great. We are awesome. We are a good time. And we will talk about a lot of things besides just Star Trek Deep Space Nine, even though that will be our primary focus. Things like The Expanse, both the book series and the TV series, and other things that are just generally, sci-fi or Trek in nature. Like, for example, Strange New Worlds, and one of the new Star Trek shows that's out that is absolutely hitting it out of the park every single episode this season, which is only season 2 of the show. You're going to hear me pretty much fanboy out about all of that really, really soon. So I will try to rein it in as best I can, but I'm just letting you know it's happening. So be prepared for it.
Right.
But now, before we get into all that, as always, I'd like to check in with David because we haven't really spoken since last week. So, David, how has your week been going?
It's fine. Work was better this week, more sales than previous weeks, which is good because it would get a little frustrating. Like, what's going on? That's good. I finished another. I cycle through books, and so I just finished another biography of one of the founding fathers, and that means that I'm now on The Expanse, book 4. So I'm about 200 some pages in. I knocked out 100 pages while I was waiting for my car to get the oil inspection or the oil change to be done. But my car's mileage was 60,000, so it's another one of those bigger checkup things. So they had other things to do, like do the brakes and other things. And I'm supposed to go back to do some more work. But I knocked out 100 pages while I was waiting for like 4 hours. So.
So this is David actually putting me on notice.
I was about to say, I don't know where you're at. So I don't know.
Yes, he is letting me know because I had a great head start on reading the book before because he had other things he was doing. And so gave me an opportunity to kind of get ahead of him a bit because as much as I swear that I'm not doing a lot, apparently I do just enough that keeps me from being able to like dial in on a couple of things. So reading, being able to sit and just have dedicated time to read is difficult at times. So yeah, I had a great head start. He's letting me know he's hard on my heels here. I just recently was in, I have to go back and check, I think chapter 23, I want to say. Okay. Maybe a little bit further than that. I think that's the last time I actually paid attention to a chapter number because for a while there I was just reading it. So right. I might be more further ahead than that.
So I'll just tell you where I'm at. Just you'll probably know where I'm at. Naomi just got caught trying to sabotage some of the baddies. So
okay,
that keeps
you. And so and that's kind of what I was alluding to last week when I was saying there are some things that Naomi does that makes me like, I liked her from the show, and now I was like, you're doing things. So okay. All right, so we're not going to talk about that now. Actually, that's going to be.
I can totally like go to something else and come back if I need to come back.
No. We're gonna. I'm gonna see. My plan was for us to kind of make this a part of what we're going to be doing for our 100th episode because we're coming up on our 100th. So that should be plenty of time for us to get through and prepare and so forth. So yeah. So if you're interested in the Expanse book series by James Corey, you should definitely pick those up, read them, tune in for all that kind of breakdown stuff we're going to do. We do a lot of where we're not just talking about the books, but we're doing a direct comparison to the show as well. So if you want to watch the show, if you haven't watched it yet, it's on Amazon. So go watch it. It's great. I still go back to it. Reading the books really helps me to make me want to go back and watch it again. Yeah. But there's still some stuff in the show that's just it's great to see, and it's very compelling. And the more I watch it, especially the more I rewatch it, the more I realize how well done that show is.
Yeah.
And it's just so rare to see, especially for like a sci-fi show of like this day and age. Because a lot of times now, like I can't even think of another mainstream sci-fi show that's even on right now, and I'm normally pretty good. I mean, besides Star Trek, of course, but I'm just saying something else besides Star Trek that's out. There's really not anything.
Not
And
of
then,
the sort. Yeah. Yeah. I
right,
got you.
not of this type. And then like the few other things that I guess you could consider sci-fi, they're so like they lose themselves in trying to convey some kind of message or make some kind of pseudo political statement or whatever, that your interest in the show is minimal. It's like, unless you wanted to sit here and be lectured to every day, I don't think that you're really going to want to watch them. So yeah, I don't find that interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's enough of all that. Again, tune in to our 100th episode. This is our 96th, I think, 95th, 96th
Oh, wow.
episode. So it's
Okay.
not that far away. And yeah, we're not only going to talk Deep Space Nine and looking back and all that stuff, but there's going to be a lot of things we're going to do. So get on board and come join us, and we're going to have a great time. Promise.
Right.
Now, as for me, my week, I'll sum it up for you real quick. I worked out, I helped out family, and I worked. There.
Summarized. Done.
That's it. There just really wasn't a lot that changed this week from last week. I've been making pretty good progress with the workouts, which again is something I intend to talk about when we get to our 100th, kind of giving like an update and also kind of revealing where, if you are interested in any of the workouts that I have done, there'll be a place where I've been posting all these things kind of silently, where you can go and check those out. And if you're interested in like kind of getting jump started on workouts, how to do that, where to, kind of get information and inspiration, I'm going to put all that stuff out for the 100th episode. I was trying to do a little bit sooner than that, but it was too much. It was too much to do so soon. So saving it for then. All right.
Gotcha.
But of course, as always, I like to say we are not here for all that. We are here to dive into rules of engagement. The 18th
of this season.
18th of this season, 88th overall, I believe, of Deep Space Nine.
90th according to Wikipedia.
90th. I thought it was okay.
Bar Association was 88. So
okay, maybe that's what it was. I was thinking about that one because we did it not too long ago. But anyway, great episode featuring both Worf and Sisko. First time we've really seen them paired up this way.
True.
And really kind of paired up in general, because the thing about the last time that we saw them, it was more the introduction of Worf to Deep Space Nine, not them having to work together for anything.
Right.
But David, would you like to give the recap, or would you like me to do it?
I mean, I feel like this is a you one for sure.
I agree.
Go for it.
I wasn't gonna say anything. All right. So yeah, just real quick, we're gonna just do the highlights because there's a lot to talk about here and a lot we want to really get into with the show. Basically, this one starts with Worf kind of in a dazed dream state. He's on the Defiant, and he's kind of running through corridors, and it's clear they've been attacked or something, but you're seeing smattering of Starfleet officers, but then you start to see like a lot of like Klingons around, Klingon children and Klingon warriors and all kinds of disjointed imagery, which ends up with Worf waking up in a holding cell with Odo watching over him. Right. We find out that Worf has been arrested for murder, basically. And it turns out that what's happened is Worf was put in command of the Defiant for an escort mission with the Cardassians. They were escorting a Cardassian convoy, and they knew that the Klingons were going to be in the area. The Klingons were going to potentially be attacking them, and that's why they were providing the escort service. The route that they were going to be taking was fairly close to some civilian commercial passenger lanes that are used, basically. And at some point during one of the battles, a Klingon civilian ship wandered into the foray and decloaked directly in front of the Defiant, and Worf fired upon and subsequently destroyed the vessel. 441 people on board, all killed, all civilians and in various walks of life, soldiers, shopkeepers, so forth and so on. So now our favorite Klingon is on trial, and a new Klingon has popped up to basically request extradition of Worf to the Klingon homeworld, where he would face judgment and punishment. And his name is Cheepak, I believe. And there is a Vulcan admiral who has come to the station who is going to sit over the extradition proceedings, and Sisko has to argue for Worf to stay.
Right.
And so it looks like it's a pretty open and shut case. Worf did fire upon the ship. These people did die. Worf didn't precisely follow procedure, because it's like there was a moment where he should have scanned the vessel and seen what was going on, what was what before he opened fire, but instead he chose to protect his ship and crew and fired first.
Right.
So this is not necessarily a major issue, but it is in the sense that all these civilians died, and it's going to be a big coup for the Klingons on the political scene, something that they haven't really been able to do in a long time. If they can score some major political points against the Federation by bringing Worf down. So that's really their kind of interest in going with this. We see several people who were on the Defiant during the time or were associated with Worf around this mission in general give their testimony to Worf's state of mind and to his decisions and things that he did and didn't do and what they would have done in his place. It's an interesting way they shot it, because a lot of it is done in this weird kind of fourth wall breaking perspective where they're talking directly to us while they're giving their testimony. Some of it's kind of funny, like when Quark can't remember who's at the bar and talking to whom and so forth.
Yeah.
Great little moments like that, interject a little humor into something that's very serious.
Right.
But even then, with all the information that's coming out, it still looks like Worf's pretty guilty until Odo, who's been investigating all of this at Sisko's behest, comes across a rather peculiar bit of information about the 441 people who died. Sisko then takes this to the admiral, whose name is Talara, to present the information. And basically, we discovered that these 441 people were on another ship several months ago that supposedly crashed in the mountains of some obscure system somewhere, and apparently miraculously survived long enough to several weeks later take another civilian trip and get blown up by Worf. All the same people, same crew, everybody, exact same stuff, but didn't die the first time, but now they died at Worf's hands.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Yes. So now Sisko kind of lays it out that this is clearly a conspiracy, an eloquent plot put together by the Klingon High Command, basically to bring Worf down. That this was a way of them not only scoring points against the Federation, but to also, attack Worf. He's the only Klingon in Starfleet. What better way to really kind of knock at Starfleet's principles of inclusion and so forth if this one lone Klingon is out here just murdering people? And they really tried to make it seem like Worf had a grudge against the Klingon Empire for his mistreatment, which to a certain degree he kind of admits that he does.
Right.
But with the revelation of the information about the crew and the double death and so forth, the extradition case is dismissed. Worf is going to stay. Worf is going to stay in Starfleet, and then he has to deal with the kind of the other fallout, basically recognizing he should have taken the mission in the first place because he was clearly still affected by his status with the Klingon Empire, and that he should have double checked before he opened fire. And Sisko gives him a very important lesson about what it means to not just be a Starfleet officer, but how to be a captain. And he tells Worf, you're going to make a hell of a captain someday. First time anybody's ever really said that to our favorite Klingon here. And again, great scenes that we're going to talk about. But that's it. That's essentially the episode. Great episode. You should go watch it. All these episodes are on Paramount or Paramount Plus, whichever one you've got. You should go and watch them. Right. But what do you think? Did I get it all? Did I hit the essentials?
Oh, the essentials for sure. We got a lot of details to hit up, but this one does summarize nicely, as you've just done for us. So, yeah.
All right. So, to that end, I'm going to ask you, as I like to, of course, first thoughts, first impressions. So, for those of you who are just kind of new to our show, I have watched every bit of Star Trek many times. David, on the other hand, is new to a lot of Trek, and in particular, new to Deep Space Nine. So, this is his first run through of everything, and I'm so freaking jealous. Yeah. Tell us, what did you think? First impressions of this episode.
My first impressions were, I feel like the scope of the trial is off. I feel like it should be bigger. I mean, it's supposed to be private. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be something. But let me just quickly say this: I watched the episode last night, and for whatever reason, like scenes from A Few Good Men were up on my YouTube, scroll, and so I watched some clips from that. And that, as people will remember, is the Tom Cruise movie, where I want the truth, you can't handle the truth, classic courtroom drama. And I feel like this one, just in comparison, like it's having to go up against something like that in my mind. Now, I want to be very clear. The standout of this episode is hands down Ron Canada as the Klingon
Chipok.
Yeah, Council Chipok. He steals this entire episode. He is on a rampage, just stealing this whole episode. He is charismatic. He is forceful. He's knows what he wants. He's the perfect lawyer. He knows the answer to his questions before he asks them. For example, he wants to present evidence from Quark's diary, I think is what it is. And
Worf's personal log, I believe.
Yeah, and everyone's like, well, how the hell did you get that information? And he's like, does it matter? Worf, do you have any objections to me entering this into the record? Knowing that Worf's pride and I have nothing to hide will allow him to pass it on, even though don't let him. He gets Worf to attack him during the trial. I'll never attack an unarmed person. And then he basically starts insulting him to the point where he does attack. Worf does attack him. And yeah, it's great. Like, this character is fantastic. Would love to see more of him. I doubt we will, unfortunately, but
well, I will tell you that Mr. Canada is no stranger to Star Trek. He has appeared in a couple of other episodes of various Trek shows. In fact, right. He was in the Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Masterpiece Society. That's the one where they discovered the humans who were living under that dome, and everybody had been genetically engineered to be perfect for whatever role it was they had in society at the time.
Right.
And Geordi, being blind, is the one that ultimately solves their society's calamitous issue or whatever.
Right.
And then he was also in an episode of Star Trek Voyager in which he played a Malon, which is this group of aliens that basically are like, their society is like a bunch of garbage men. And they take out the wastes that their society builds up and they dump them in various areas of deep space, much to the detriment of some of the other races that may live in those areas. So, he was there. So if you are interested in seeing more of his work in Trek, look for him on Voyager, look for him in Next Generation, and you will certainly find him.
Well, yeah. Well, certainly here as this lawyer, he's great. Steals the scenes he's in. But the reason I bring up A Few Good Men is like Dax and O'Brien on the stand. I feel like they should be more professional a little bit. Like Dax being all like flabbergasted by like these questions and not holding her poker face, and O'Brien also being like, well, I don't know, I wasn't in charge. Like,
well, I feel like O'Brien did better than Jadzia in their respective scenes, only because I think they were trying to highlight that Jadzia was more flustered with a potential budding attraction, and that so maybe that was what her issue was with being able to talk about Worf and her esteem for him and so forth, versus O'Brien being like, he says, I stand by his decision and I fully support him. Right. It's like, I wouldn't have made that decision, but I wasn't in command. He's trying to establish there's a separation between, when you're in those particular moments, what you would do, you never would know.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that Chip Hawk was trying to like browbeat him about a little bit.
Well, the thing about O'Brien, and I want to be very clear, the episode does address this. O'Brien is not a commanding officer. He's not an officer at all. So to ask he's a
non-commissioned officer. Yeah, he's a non-com.
Yeah. To ask one of those guys, what would you have done in command? I felt like he could just always go to, I'm not trained for command. I have no. But the episode does address that. He has the Klingon council, I forget his name at the moment. He says, you've been in like 235 combat scenarios. I want you declared as an expert in terms of combat, and do you object? And so like they make it clear that O'Brien, having been in a lot of combat situations, should know what to do or how things are supposed to go. My whole point though is that I feel like I just feel like everyone was just like falling over like dominoes in front of this defense council. Like they are. I mean, that's the point, though. We're trying to set up.
Yes, that was the point.
The Worf is in a dire situation. It's only at the very end that Odo brings out the ace in the hole and saves the day. But yeah, I want to be also clear. This is also the thing that this Klingon guy wants is not to even prove that he's guilty, but to prove that he is a Klingon at heart and that he deserves to be judged by other Klingons for his actions and not necessarily in the Federation. He wants to move beyond just facts and of the details of the case to what does Worf believe in his inner person. Because it becomes clear through what we hear from Quark and the others that Worf did have a desire for vengeance against Klingons for the way they treated him. He wanted to prove himself, and he was raring to go for a battle. That doesn't necessarily prove that he was wrong in his actions. And in fact, I think Sisko being all like, you were wrong to do what you did. I'm like, come on, Sisko, really? You gonna chew him out here at the end of the episode?
So we're gonna get to that because I think that Sisko was right because we have to. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to say that my understanding of the Kobayashi Maru scenario is exactly like this. So I get it. The Kobayashi Maru is exact same. You have a civilian vessel in need. You go to help it out. Is it birds of prey or is it just some cloaked vessel of some kind?
No, they're Klingon in the simulation. It's Klingons.
Yeah,
Klingon birds of prey.
They appear and they start attacking, and the whole scenario is lose-lose. There's no way to really win. What do you do? And that's basically the scenario that's almost exactly presented to Worf in this scenario, and he makes a intelligent decision. He's reading where the tachyon surges are, whatever the particles are that show where a cloaked ship is, and they've been seeing how they've been doing the attack patterns, and so he makes a preemptive strike. And it just so happens that that's also where this fake cloaked vessel is, and that's where we get everything going on. So I feel like I'm on Worf's side here. I'm like, he was making a wise decision. He's one ship versus two. He has to defend civilian vessels. It's not his fault that there are civilians lanes nearby from Klingons. It felt a little too, it was just the right scenario for Worf to screw this up. But you say Sisko's right. Go for it.
Yes. Okay. So there's a lot here. So you're right. This is basically Worf's Kobayashi Maru. And the point of the Kobayashi Maru test, at least as I understand it, is to get the commanding officer to basically be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. You, as a Starfleet officer, your job is ultimately to lay down your life to protect the greater innocent, greater good, whatever that is, right? So making a pragmatic or military decision is incorrect in comparison to how they're trained as Starfleet officers. Another thing we have to keep in mind is that Starfleet is also trained to not fire first. They do not start fights. They are more than willing to defend themselves, yes, but they are not the first strike type. This is something that's come up again and again in Trek, all the way back to its inception, and something that has come up in, especially here in recent Trek, with shows like Star Trek Discovery, where our hero character Michael Burnham in the first episode does commit a first strike offense against the Klingons, which, while correct, is against Starfleet protocol and also sparks a war. So there's a lot of this whole, Starfleet does not fire first. We do not attack first.
Right.
So Worf, being a Klingon in command who is now striking first in the situation, is at the heart of the issue. And again, as Chipok was saying, that's because Worf is a Klingon. No matter how far away he tries to remove himself from the Klingon Empire and wears, the Federation's uniform and so forth, he is a Klingon at heart. And only a true Klingon will understand this, and therefore only a true Klingon can judge him.
Right.
It's interesting because, as they have noted throughout the whole episode, Worf's whole position is that he's clearly upset about his treatment at the hands of other Klingons. He sided against Gowron. Gowron's stripped him of his lands and titles and so forth. His brother was rejected from the brother rejected from Klingon society, again, effectively killed his brother because of it. And now Alexander, as Worf's son, must bear the stigma of being the son of a traitor and a coward and so forth. And this is all because, and Worf is feeling, especially as a Klingon who understands the rituals and those kind of cultural significance of those titles and things like that, to be labeled a coward and a traitor. And remember, we had seen Worf in the past fight against this for his family before. The Duras family trying to heap a whole bunch of crazy nonsense onto the Moog family. Worf has stood against this for decades now. We've watched him fight this, and now here he is having to still deal with it, and he's been completely kicked out of one culture, and all he has left is the Federation. And now here comes the Klingon Empire once again, trying to take that from him.
Right.
So he's very much his back is against the wall here. And when Sisko comes to him at the end, and he's like, "Yeah, I realized that I had something to prove," and it wasn't that he had something to prove to Starfleet. He had something to prove to the other Klingons. He wanted them to know that even though they had done all of this stuff to him, he was still Klingon. So he still felt that bloodlust. He still felt that desire to fight and be a warrior. And he even says that, I in the trials, it's, "I am a Klingon. I am bred to battle,"
Right.
So yeah, he knew all of this going in. And so it gave him, it colored his mindset. And he recognized that because he was still feeling so put out, he should not have taken the mission where he could have potentially run into Klingons that he would have to fight. Just like when they removed Captain Picard from fighting the Borg again, when the Borg reared their head in the movie First Contact, the newly christened Enterprise E was way out near the Romulan neutral zone, not doing anything with the Borg, because they were like, "Yeah, you're too close to this. We don't want to introduce an unstable element into our war here." He eventually goes anyway, and he is an unstable element. He loses it. So Starfleet has knowledge.
I haven't watched that one yet, so
no
spoilers.
Sorry, I totally forgot.
I've seen Generations, not First Contact just yet.
Great movie, obviously.
I look forward to it.
So, well, I mean, we're already there. Spoilers, sorry.
Yeah.
I will just say that basically Starfleet knows what it's doing here, knows the people who have suffered traumatic events at the hands of particular, cultures or entities or whatever, probably shouldn't be put back into a situation where they need to face them again. Worf has, he's kind of flying under the radar here because he comes off as so austerely stoic, that no one thinks that anything is really ruffling him. But really, he's quite upset. His brother is dead. His land and titles, his family is cast down in disgrace, like all this stuff. Of course the man is upset.
Right.
And so when Sisko comes after him and he's just like, "Yeah, you never should have gone on this mission, and you know that."
Right.
So yes, I feel like Cisco was absolutely justified in coming after Worf a little bit there, and just kind of trying to not chastise him so much as make him learn a valuable lesson here, so that in the
Right.
future he can recognize this about himself and
Right.
not put himself in another similar situation.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. I guess for me, part of what was kind of frustrating about this episode is feeling like Worf. I hope this truly is a turning point for Worf, because like the
Oh,
moment where I'll just pull up the guy's name because I got to say it correctly. Chapok. When Chapok is doing the whole thing about can I put this into the record, even though I didn't obtain this legally. I'm challenging your pride. I have nothing to hide. Be smart, bro. Like, this man is playing you hard, and instead of this sense of honor, which we appreciate about you, take your sense of honor and marry it to some wisdom, to some smarts, some like, no, I'm not playing your game here. I know there's something up with this whole situation. I mean, really, how does a civilian ship decloak while charging at the Defiant? I mean, when we see the scene where it decloaks,
mm-hmm.
it's coming at the Defiant. Like, how the heck did that happen? I can see it decloaking off your starboard bow and you turning the ship and firing being a mistake. But if something's coming at you while you're in the middle of a firefight, that's why I feel like Worf is being done dirty here, even by Cisco a little bit, because it's like, no, it was a good fire. It was a good. I think he fired it.
I will also say that I feel like Worf was definitely set up here, because what Worf notices is the firing pattern that they're using, where they kind of do these strafing runs and come in, blast them with a few volleys of phaser fire or whatever, and then they would cloak and disappear. And they're kind of like circling around the Defiant, decloaking on one side, firing, and then cloaking, and then coming back on the other side, firing and cloaking, and so forth. So I think what he was noticing was that's what was happening. So they were decloaking on one side to fire, recloaking on the other side to hide themselves. And that's why he spun the ship 180, so that he could catch them when they were going to decloak again and potentially fire. But he noticed it. I believe the Klingons did it on purpose, because they knew that eventually he would catch on. And that's why the ship was positioned so perfectly that when they wheeled around and immediately fired, the ship was at point blank range. There was no missing that ship at all. There were no strafing runs and ever. It took the full brunt of that salvo from the Defiant and blew up.
Right. Yeah, it's clear that he was set up. I guess my point is like they did a great job setting him up. Like,
they did an excellent job. Excellent job of setting him up. There was no question. It wasn't a stray photon torpedo that went around or through another ship they were firing at and hit the errant convoy or whatever. No. Right. It was, you got all of this ship in one.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it was an interesting episode for that reason. Again, this is another episode where it's like, what would a two-parter look like? Like, what if Worf had lost this case?
I agree with you there. I would have loved to see this where Worf lost and they were extraditing him.
Yes.
And then the information or whatever came in last minute, and now they have to go and get him before he crosses into Klingon territory. Right. Where he would have been summarily executed.
It'd have been a great cliffhanger if Odo shows up during the final minutes of the episode, and he's like, I figured it out, but it's too late. The ruling's been done. He's in custody. He's already on the way out. And
he's already, I would love if he's already on the ship. Ship's already undocked or whatever you call it.
Well, the last thing we see is the ship, blinking out
just
as it goes
going into warp. Yeah, as it goes to warp and takes off, and then here comes Odo.
Yeah, because what's great is Chapok says when he sits down with Cisco at one point, they're having a recess it's in the middle. It's right before Worf is being called up. Worf is going to be called up to testify for himself, and Cisco's in. I don't think he's in Quarks actually, but the other Chapok comes up, sits down, they talk, and he says, "I want you to concede because I want to defend Worf in the Klingon Empire. Like, he doesn't care about winning or losing; he cares about the fight, which is another great Klingon thing. It's like, of course, Klingons want the fight. He wants to
ready
prove
for
that
a
he's
fight.
victorious.
He's ready for the fight. That just like what Worf was
Yeah.
saying. He lives to fight. He lives for the battle. So he's like, he comes to Cisco. He's like, yeah, you go ahead. You concede. You've already lost here.
Right.
I will take Worf, and then we will go to the next battle, and I will fight for him there too, because I'm ready for this. I want to keep doing this.
And
like, yeah,
part
that's
of the reason
his
I
whole
want
thing.
that is I want to see Klingon justice. We've seen versions of it. We've seen how they do the High Council stuff, but I want to see a true on trial. How much of it is just a pull out your batleth and whoever wins wins? How much of it is a trial?
They don't. Well, I mean, if you watched Star Trek Enterprise, you get one. So
I'm sure. I'm sure there are definitely some.
And then there's also the movie Star Trek. I think it's 6, The Undiscovered Country. Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy are put on trial there, and it's a Klingon trial, and so you get to watch that as well. That was actually the first time we ever saw a Klingon trial. Quite interesting, and that's a great movie, by the way. That's probably one of the best ones. Of the 6 that they do. God, 6 movies, Jesus. Yeah. But yeah, that's one of the highlights of that movie.
Okay. Point being though is like, if this had been a 2-parter, another great chance for a 2-part episode. Yeah, and I want Worf to have his time with the Klingons, and maybe we'll get that. We still got 3 more seasons after this, so I'm sure there's time for us to address this storyline. But anyway, yeah, this is an interesting episode. I wish, like, the idea that Cisco is his main counsel, and yet he has to testify on behalf of his own, subordinate officer. I feel like that's an example of where it gets a little bit silly. Like, why isn't there counsel for Worf outside of, to be clear, I know that in TNG we had similar situations.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's a standard Trek go-to is the officers, the senior officers, wherever they are also having to serve as legal counsel for
and to
whomever.
Be clear, if we brought in another character and that character was going up against Ch'Pok, then it would be them two having the conflict over trial stuff as opposed to Worf and Cisco and the others having to fight on his behalf. So I'm not saying that. I mean, it makes sense for the storytelling, but it also doesn't quite jive with reality, at least how I expect it to go. But anyway, the trial stories are always fun. The nitty gritty of law. How does this work? Where's the finer detail? Split off and make something wrong or illegal versus okay or acceptable or justified. So, like, this is a great example of that. Did Worf truly do anything wrong? Again, as we've discussed, I think he was justified in what he did. Whether or not he was been set up, I think this is the Kobayashi Maru situation. This is how he tried solving it. It backfired in his face, but not because he didn't try or wasn't intelligent or wasn't making decisions. That's why I feel like O'Brien being like, I wouldn't have done it, being like, I mean, really? I don't know. I mean, I don't quite trust O'Brien's judgment there. I feel like Worf was right. But, I've never had to be in those situations either. How much do you just start shooting off your valuable, your torpedoes? How many torpedoes do we have? We only have 10, and I shoot off all 9 that I have left because I think I got a great shot. That's also a stupid move. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, Star Trek loves a law procedural. I think every major Trek show has done at least one. There have been some shows that do a lot. I think Next Generation did a couple of them. We had the Measure of the Man one with Data proving his rights. We also had the conspiracy one with Simon Tarsus and being a spy, and that's when that Judge Admiral Satie comes on and tries to take Picard down, and she loses.
Yeah.
This is this is Deep Space Nine doing it. Deep Space Nine did one also with Jadzia. We saw that early on in season
one.
Season
one. Very early on.
Voyager,
episode 3 or 4. That was really early.
Voyager does it. I think Voyager does it more than any other show because Voyager did it with the holographic Doctor, Tom Paris, and Chief Engineer B'Elanna Torres. So I think they got the most with 3. Right. And then I know Discovery does it at least once. Strange New Worlds just did it, and that was their first time. And it was a fantastic episode. It's called Ad Astra per Aspera, and you should go watch it. It was fantastic. Can't say enough great things about that one. We'll talk about that some other time. Great episode. They've all done it. Like I said, Enterprise did theirs. So Star Trek loves a good law procedural show. They try their best to kind of without having to really nail down Federation law, Starfleet protocol, so forth and so on. They give you a lot of things that you can still work with. Right. So that's what I really like about it, because after so many decades, you can kind of begin to get an overall sense of what the code of law for Starfleet is anyway. Right. What code of law it is for the Greater Federation and any particular planet, still murky on that. But for the Federation, you get a pretty solid take, I should say.
By the way, the episode Dax was episode 8. I just looked it up. So
okay,
Anyway, keep going.
Now I just want to give all the accolades, and got to pay some attention here to Captain Sisko, Avery Brooks. I think he does a great job here, just really working as Worf's advocate. Now, might be interesting to note that originally when this episode was pitched, it was supposed to be Sisko who was in the hot seat, not Worf. I don't know. I don't think Worf would have been defending. I don't think it was a simple matter of a role reversal or anything like that. But it was originally pitched that it was supposed to be Sisko, not Worf. They decided instead to go with Worf because, as I said earlier, Worf was already on the outs with Klingon culture, Klingon Empire. Right. And so it was kind of like Worf was retreating to what he felt was a safe bet by being, aligned with the Federation and with Starfleet. And so they really wanted to kind of, slap him around a little bit, basically, and make him, kind of test who he is and his understanding of who he is and what he wants and so forth. And I think that's another reason why we get those lines in the end where he's realizing he shouldn't have taken the mission and, again, moving forward beyond thinking as just a military individual, but more what's the next step beyond that, which is what we want our captains to be, someone who can lay down their life for others and so forth.
Right.
But anyway, Sisko does a great job in this episode. I loved his scenes. His back and forth with Chibok was great. I particularly loved when he had Chibok on the stand, and he's just, isn't it possible that the Klingons would lie to us, or isn't it in your best interest sometimes lying? He's like, oh no, I would say that we're not friends, but we're not enemies either. It's the finger wagging and the the long drawn out. I loved every bit of that. Right. I think that Avery Brooks really just kind of completely dove into this role. In this particular episode. I think he did a great job here. And again, seeing him not only defending Worf, but also mentoring Worf, I also liked, because we didn't really see a lot of that in Next Generation, I felt. Picard is he's very lofty at times. He kind of is so far above and removed from his crew. And it's like everybody wants Picard to be proud of them, right? I feel like everybody's always looking up to him. Right. And aspiring to be more like him or whatever. Whereas Sisko is much more, he's in the mix with his people. He understands, or he tries to understand his people. And he very much wants to, guide, mentor them into being their best selves and into better roles. And that's, I loved when he was telling Worf, and that's why in spite of everything, you'll make a hell of a captain someday. It's like, he's right. I would love to see Captain Worf. I would love to see what that would eventually, mature into. Right. But I think he does a great job in this.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point about and that whole Picard Cisco dynamic we've talked about multiple times. They're like, I mean, Cisco went with Worf to the Klingon homeworld for various things.
You mean
But yeah,
Picard went with
I'm
with
sorry.
Worf.
My apologies. Yes,
Picard
Picard.
went with Worf. Yes.
Yes. Cisco has definitely been more like, come on, Worf, like we do the thing. Come on, I'm rah cheering for him, mentoring him a bit. Yeah, Picard is more like, lofty, stand above, and blah, blah,
He's
blah,
like
blah,
the
blah.
regal statesman, who comes down and makes an eloquent speech, and everybody's
Yeah.
just in awe that the statesman would even speak on your behalf, let alone be here. And you're just supposed to, oh my God,
be in awe.
Jean-Luc said something, and then he was right. Move on.
Yeah.
Cisco he's there with you in the trenches, man. He's battling with you for sure.
Yeah. And I think this kind of what I'm thinking of is that Worf is not going to be a captain of the type of like Picard. The Defiant is a perfect vessel for him to be in charge of. He's not the flagship going around doing diplomatic missions. He's there to defend the station and to perform any sort of duty that requires a starship available. In this case, we need someone to defend a line of transport ships with a humanitarian mission. Or we need to go out to the Gamma Quadrant through the wormhole to defend something or other. They're not really meant to be diplomats when they're on the ship. And if they need diplomats, then Cisco can step in. But Worf is there to perform the militaristic side of things, which is great because that's exactly who he is. So I like the idea that he's kind of like the de facto captain of the Defiant now. Cisco is the captain of the station and of the Defiant in a general sense, but Worf is the one who gets the more hands-on, dirty work with the Defiant, and that's a great role for him. So I look forward to him continuing to have that role. I hope he continues to have that role, and that's what he continues to do. I was looking at the Wikipedia article here, and there was someone who apparently critiqued this episode of like, how did they know that Worf would be in charge of the ship? And I'm like, by this point, it's pretty clear that Worf is like, I mean, he's living on the ship, right? Like, if anyone knows he's living on the ship and he's the one who usually gets command, then it wouldn't be hard to set him up for a Defiant. To set up the Defiant.
And let's not forget that the Federation, in my opinion, is the worst at keeping secrets. Like they just don't do a great job of hiding things at all. And yes, Worf does live on the Defiant full time. They also they would have known the Federation, especially in the hope of furthering cooperation down the line with the Klingon Empire, would have relayed certain information to them. And remember, Worf was already given a title before the 100% separation of Klingon and Federation interests here, right? So it's not beyond the scope to think that they were at least keeping tabs on the only Klingon to be in Starfleet, and also to be who's turned down Gowron, and I also think that we see Cisco put Worf in command of the mission, and he put him in command, and the mission was still several days away. We see Worf; he's in Quark's bar for a little bit. He's fighting with Dax in the holodeck a little bit,
Yeah.
So he's clearly got some downtime before the mission actually starts. Is it impossible to think that the intelligence network wouldn't have relayed to them that this major convoy, which they were clearly dead set on attacking, so they had to know about the convoy and know there was going to be someone protecting it? Was it so far beyond the scope for them to be like, we found out it's this ship, it's going to be commanded by this officer, they're leaving out on this day? Of course not.
Right.
Of course they could figure that stuff out. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I fully agree. The real question is, I guess for me, I don't think of the Klingons as the type to set up some sort of complex conspiracy of setup like this. Mm-hmm. That's more a Romulan type thing than it is a Klingon thing. So I'm curious that we don't know the details about how it came to be. We also don't know how the battle ended, because as soon as Worf fires on this ship, that's the end of the battle as far as we know it. I mean, maybe if I go back and listen, they'll say something else about how it ended. But from what I remember, like, that's the end of the battle. if they didn't address it,
essentially, because I believe that was the end goal. It wasn't so much the destruction of the Cardassian convoy as it was kind of obliterating the Federation's credibility. And once that transport ship was destroyed, that was mission accomplished. And I think the Klingons just bugged out from there because they got what they wanted. That was
That's
it.
Exactly right. I also think that's also the explanation for why Worf, even if Worf hadn't been in charge and Sisko had been in charge, but Sisko made the same mistake, they still would have got the same result. This courtroom drama is specifically to Worf, but the overall conspiracy of a ship that has a bunch of dead people on it, that could have worked against Kira. What if Kira had been in charge? What the Klingons did was set up a pattern and then manipulate someone recognizing the pattern and then causing them to make a decision that backfired on them on a public relations level. Again, I still feel like this is the casualties of war. During World War II and World War I, there were merchant vessels who were actually smuggling, military stuff, and that isn't what the Cardassians are apparently doing here. I'm not saying that that's what the plot of the episode is. My point is, civilian vessels have been fired upon, and that has caused tragedies. But there have been many times in history where that was justified on behalf of the people making those decisions. Like, hey, you're not just a civilian military vessel. It's just a civilian vessel. You're a military vessel, on some capacity. So anyway, point being that I think that the courtroom drama was hands down just amazing with Ron Canada playing the part of Ch'pak. Great stuff. While I might have some nitpicks about how it went down, how some things occurred, and I wish they again could have made the trial feel a little bit more oomph. Like there's only one judge. Like maybe it's a
little more complicated, right?
Yeah,
and I will agree with you there too. I thought that it was strange that we had just one judge presiding over this, especially with the implication being this was a very important decision being made,
right?
And it was going to have, again, far-reaching, fallout here from sending this Federation officer. Because regardless of his, he's a Klingon, not a Klingon, whatever, he's still a Federation officer. He's a Starfleet officer,
right?
And going to his death. That's what he would be doing. He'd be going to his death.
Right.
So, the fact that there wasn't a panel, I thought that was a bit strange.
Yeah.
I would have been more interested if they had, maybe there had been like 2-3 other judges sitting there with Talara to help make this decision and to poke some holes.
The gong-like bell. Have they always done that? I'm sure they have, but I'm just...
They've used other things that were similar, but essentially, yes. There's no gavel in Starfleet, apparently. It's all...
Well, I remember in that Dax episode, the Bajoran judge, old lady, she used like a rock, which was really the rock she used.
The Klingons have a similar thing. It's like a giant stone ball, but it's being held by this like talon claw thing. And they don't so much grab that as they grab the arm of the talon and pick the whole thing up and slam it, and it sparks. It shoots sparks. It's so cool. I was like, I want that so bad.
Right. I'm telling you, man,
are awful.
The best thing Star Trek did was the Klingons. They're fascinating. They're such a great sci-fi culture.
That scene alone in the movie The Undiscovered Country is great, where the judge he's way up high and he's sentencing McCoy and Kirk, and they even did the judge right. So like he's sitting up way up high and he's got this huge like shroud cloak thing over him, so you can't see his face really. You can see like just his nose and mouth and this long, super white beard that's hanging out, right? And he's got this really like hardcore, gravelly voice when he's sentencing them. And he's like, I sentence you for the rest of your lives. And then he raises this clawed talon thing and bam! And it's this huge sparks flying off. Like you got one of those sticks you're trying to start a fire with. It's like bam, bam, bam. And it just sparks everywhere. And I was like, this was awesome. You guys did a great job. And I will admit, I have looked for that thing. I was like, if I'm gonna buy anything from Trek, it will be that. Can't find it. Can't find it.
Atlas is actually second on the list, huh?
Oh yeah, when you see it and you see it in action, you'll know why.
I'll look it up after we're done.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, do that on YouTube. If anybody's interested, you should probably Google the scene of use the words Kirk is sentenced to Rura Penthe, which is the name of the Klingon prison colony. Rura Penthe. That's RURA PENTHE. So there, it's 2 words. That should be enough to get you to the scene where he is sentenced, and you can either watch the whole trial, you can watch just that little bit, whatever, but it's a great scene. And at first I was like, is that like the judge, is he wearing a glove? Is that what that is? But it's clearly like a whole talent thing, and he just bam great
Very good.
Well, overall, I really enjoy this episode. I enjoy this episode because we do get to see kind of a challenge to Worf having to understand that he can't just isolate himself and think of himself as just this kind of lone Klingon warrior who can only attack under certain circumstances and whatever else, that he needs to start thinking of himself as more, and especially if there's any aspiration in him to be more than just a strategic operations officer or anything else. If he wants to be a captain, he's going to have to start really thinking and acting like a captain. Right. And I love seeing the mentorship between him and Sisko really kind of solidify here. We saw it a little bit when we first saw the introduction of Worf to Deep Space Nine, and Sisko's like, I feel like we can, there's something we can do with you. I need you. Basically saying we don't waste good around here. So, we're going to figure out something that we can do for you. Right. Of course, Odo's always a delight. He wasn't in the episode much, but he's in it just enough to give you like, we're going to get this figured out. Odo's investigating. There's got to be some kind of major plot. We're going to get this. So definitely loved all of that. And I did love the perspective of, the cameras in everybody's faces. We're talking to Quark, and Quark is talking to us when they're doing the interviews. O'Brien is telling us from his perspective, being on the bridge, what he would have done. Same with Jadzia, what was going on, what they were seeing, and so forth. And they're talking directly to us while they're giving their analysis. Right. I thought it was a great way to film this episode. Very unique way to film an episode. I don't know if that would work like long term. Like, I don't know if I can imagine a whole show like this where we're kind of like flitting around from character to character and getting like this weird kind of fourth wall breaking aside perspective for multiple characters, but it'd be interesting. I know another show that did the fourth wall breaking a lot was House of Cards, which is on Netflix, the Kevin Spacey show back before the spectacular fall of Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
That was a great show as well that did that. So, but I think that was the first time I ever saw anything like that.
Right.
And then they did it here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was fun to see those little moments.
So what do you think are your major takeaways for this episode? What would you say is something that, at least one thing that stands out in your mind as something they could have done better? We've talked a lot about some of the good things that we like, but you said there were some things you could nitpick. But if there's like just one thing you really, really wish they had done better, be that filming or character development or whatever it is, what do you feel like it is for you?
It's actually kind of hard in some ways. I guess I'll say this as well. Early on in the episode, after the first courtroom scene, Ch'Pok, is it his name? Mm-hmm. He comes to Sisko while they're walking in the promenade, and he basically lays out his whole purpose for doing all this. This will ruin the Federation's reputation. It'll force you guys to pull back and give us a chance to make military advances, all on this PR stunt. And I feel like while it sets up the stakes of the episode, I also feel like it's kind of dumb to go up to your enemy, your opponent, and be like, here's all my plans. Like, this is what I'm going to do. Now, it definitely comes off as like a power play. Like, this is how confident I am in what I'm going to do, is I'm going to tell you how it goes. And it's why the character is charismatic and likable. But I also felt like, Why don't we have like Dax and like Kira talking about what they think the problems of like why aren't our characters working out this as opposed to him bragging about it? But whatever. Again, he comes off as charismatic, sets up the guy as the lawyer they have to go up against. So I'm not, and it makes it personal. Him and Cisco talking about Worf and what's going on. So I get it.
I think that was the whole point. Was like you said, to come off as more of a power move,
right?
But isn't that also like villainy 101 or the villains to come up and monologue their?
Yeah, I guess that's exactly what my critique of this episode is. In order to make the plot of the episode work and move forward and have things happen and it be cinematic, I feel like the reality of what's happening, my suspension of disbelief was strained a little bit more than I wanted it to be. Again, using A Few Good Men as an example of what feels more authentic as a courtroom drama. I feel like, yes, I think the Star Trek courtroom episodes are very memorable and have very interesting storylines, but I also feel like these are also the same critiques I have of the Data one. You know, we have a relatively small courtroom. The arguments that are being made about Data and him being alive versus not alive it just feels a little bit strained in the moment. But again, they're doing something unique. You know, this is a futuristic society we're trying to present. So I give Star Trek the benefit of the doubt. So anyway, that's my summary. The plot, in order to make the plot work and move forward, they strain some of my suspension of disbelief, which is unfortunate, but yeah.
Well, I will say that the virtue of this show is, one, it is 30 years old. So a lot of the writers, directors, and so forth who worked on this show went on to do a lot of other great TV shows. And I think they took a lot of that to heart as well, because there have been other shows that have come after these that did procedurals like this, that did these kind of law episodes, and they were fantastic. And I'm thinking, of course, of Battlestar Galactica, the reboot that was written and directed by Ronald D. Moore, who was one of our main writers, directors, and so forth here for Deep Space Nine. And there is an excellent trial episode that is done. I think it's the first episode of season 3 of Battlestar Galactica. And Gaius Baltar is put on trial. And there we do see a tribunal. Admiral Adama is one of the judges that's going to, be deciding this. But he's like one of 5 judges. He's not the sole judge and jury here. Even the president, who you would think would be a judge, isn't. But she is on trial. She does have to give testimony. And several other people do. And it's a remarkable episode. And actually... yeah, I think it's at the end of the 3rd season. Now that I think about it, because then there's some things that happen that rolls into the season finale and gives us our preview of what's to come in the 4th season. So great show. Also, I own it. I'll probably be watching that soon as well, because it's been a while since I've done a Battlestar rewatch. But yeah. They get into that more. There's a lot more that has to do with the actual protocol and procedure and what law we're going to follow and why and justifying your case and all this. It's all in there, and it's way more complicated. And the episode does take a longer time, but they give you everything, and you don't have to worry about anything else that's going on. There's no B plots. There's nothing. The whole episode is about the trial of Gaius Baltar, and it's done very well. So yeah, I think they took a lot of what there. Obviously, some people probably have the same critiques, and they just kind of kept it in their mind. And then when they got the chance to do the next thing, they did it better. So that's what I like about shows like Deep Space Nine, because it's clear that we can trace back their influence on more contemporary shows like Battlestar, like The Expanse, so forth, and see how they kind of came from what was already done here. And it just sucks that Deep Space Nine was so, passed over, looked over for such a long time, and
Right.
only fairly recently, I'd say probably within the last 10 years, has it really gotten a second look from a lot of people. So,
Gotcha.
but all right, any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode? A bit shorter than we've done the last couple, but we're trying here with our time.
Yeah, that's. I think I said my piece on this one.
All right. Well, guys, I think that's going to be it for us. Of course, as always, you can find us and follow us and listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. You can also check out our live episodes on YouTube. You can just go there and search again for The Fire Caves, and we'll pop right up. You can see us there live every week, or you can just watch any episode that we have done because, of course, they're just saved there until I get bored and take them down, which I haven't done yet, so you're in luck. So, yeah. Go ahead and take a look, watch them. Go ahead and give us any thoughts, questions, comments you got. We'd love to hear from you and answer anything that you have for us. Other than that, you can watch all Trek on Paramount and Paramount Plus. You should do so. There's some great stuff out there, and we're going to get into a lot of that too. And you don't want to be caught lacking. So go ahead, watch it. But until next time, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.